particularly taken with some of the stats that you've brought along tonight. Obviously, house building, the reform process. I can speak personally of Dún Laoghaire Rathdown and schemes that have gone in, all designed up down to the last brick, and the department have to mull over it time and time again, go back to Dún Laoghaire Rathdown, and it creates a massive delay. All the meanwhile, we're waiting for housing. The over-reliance on HAP, I see it myself, where people who are in private rented and the state is supporting their rental of that property, and the imbalance that is now being created where we're actually as a state paying more in private rent than ultimately building the properties that we can have for those who are on the lists. And indeed, as Dara said, it's cheaper to own a property than it is to rent a property. And if that doesn't tell, if that's not a catalyst really for the state to increase the supply of housing, be it in public and or private, I don't know what is. So the people who I come across, and indeed Michael and Justin, be it at the clinics that we've held, people who are working, they're doing everything right, but they cannot afford to be in private accommodation. That in itself is very worrying, because ultimately they have to depend then on the state. And it's the pressure is there on both sides, but certainly the pressure for the individual is enormous. We must do more to counteract that. So with that in mind, Niall Reynolds is going to give us an overview of that, so please welcome him. Thank you.
Just stepped on some of the ice there, didn't go me here. Can you all hear me there?
Yes.
Listen, thanks for the opportunity to talk. I'm not a member of any political party or Fianna Fáil, but I'm very happy to support anyone who is trying to promote affordable housing, which is a big problem, as we know. Spent many hours on the side of a pitch with Justin, cooling matches, with watching our girls trudging around in the mud. So I'm very happy when he asked me to come along, just to give you a couple of numbers. Just in terms of the slides here, just to give you a brief introduction, I'm an architect. I've worked in private practice for nearly 30 years. I predominantly work with developers. I started looking at overall policy about 4 or 5 years ago, and I mean, I would have thought I've been around, worked on a number of schemes, so I thought I knew how things worked. And in the past 4 years, what I did discover is that we all work in sort of silos in the construction sector. But when you step outside your comfort zone and start seeing the way things work from different perspectives, it's very challenging and very informative. So I would have had an awful lot of assumptions that I had my whole career have either been proved wrong or seriously challenged in that period of time. So what I try and do is, I mean, I'm not political advice one way or the other. I'm not half ideology. I'm not that interested in. I don't understand half of it. The other half I don't know about. But in order to fix a problem, you have to be able to measure it. You have to be able to diagnose it correctly. And one of the problems we have is getting accurate data. So what I'll do is I'll give you a couple of sort of underlying assumptions that I've discovered are wrong, which pretty well determine an awful lot of policy that we have, and then just go through a couple of numbers. I'm not going to kill you with statistics tonight, and then of course solutions, because the whole thing about this really is our kids. Is the side of a pitch, you look at your kids playing a match, and you're thinking, when you were younger, how did you get off the ground, and Jesus Christ, how are they going to fare in 10, 15 years time? Like we've just had the trajectory in the last 20 years since I bought the house, effectively wages haven't increased in 20 years. Wages have gone up by, the CSO reckon wages have increased by an average of about 1.1% over 20 years. That's 20%, 22%. House prices, even despite the crash, have gone up by about 230%. So that's why two people have to work. My kids, if they get to live in Dublin, they'll be a long way away from here because prices are so expensive. The average price is €570,000. So unless you have about 200 grand to give to each of your kids, they're going to be living a long way away. Chances are the two of them are going to have to work full time. They're going to be working for about 12 years longer than we have to, and they're both going to be in cars, and your grandkids are going to be in creches all day, and it's a nightmare scenario for kids. So I'm looking at my eldest is 17, my youngest is 10, and the one thing I have on some of the understanding I have tonight, maybe we can all work it out and get all of our kids out of the ship. But at the moment, it's not looking great because the last 20 years hasn't worked too well for us. But there are solutions, and this man here is one of the solutions. So I'm really looking forward to listening to him in about 12 minutes. So I'm going to give you some assumptions, some measurements, and some solutions. And we're going to fix the whole thing in about 12 minutes. Okay? Okay. So, maybe 13 minutes. Okay. So the first big assumption that everyone has is that increasing supply will reduce price. Right? How many people have heard that? You come here on a daily basis. It doesn't work. It's actually the exact opposite. Increasing price stimulates supply. So what we've seen in 40 years of CSO data is, as the price rises, one of the actually, if you want to put up the earlier slides, you'll see it. As prices increase, we can see it from 40 years supply comes online. So when the prices increase, people start bidding more and more and more and more. When they flatten out, they drop 12 months later, and the strongest correlations in 12 months. So now with prices flattening, everyone thinks, isn't that great? I'm saying no, because you're going to see a fall off or a leveling out of new home supply, and that's the way it works. When you're building a phase, you sell it out. If it's taken longer for you to sell it, you wait before you commence the next one. So what we saw was, on the ski slope, as prices went up, price and supply followed each other. If increasing supply reduced price, there would be a divergence. They follow each other, and it's 1 year. So that's the first big one. And the second one to remember is that over 30% of all sales prices are developer's profit and land price. So if anyone's talking about reducing costs, to get down, the average first-time buyer's price is $370,000 in Dublin. The affordable threshold for 1.5 salaries, average salaries going in, is $240,000. That's $67,000 of a combined salary, one full-time salary and one part-time salary. So if we want to get to the 240 level, we have to knock 30 to 40% off sales prices, which is a challenge. And the private sector just can't do it because land values are too high. Church Road down here, there's a site launched yesterday on the market for 50 odd units. The site price there is €145,000 a site. So Bill was to try and build one of his affordable homes at Ballymun prices. He's selling it for €219,000 at Ballymun. Site value from Dublin City Council is €1,000. If Bill got that site in the morning to sell at those prices, they'd be $380,000. So they're way over that line. So all policy measures you have to look at, you draw the red line across them and you say 240. Is it going to get how many? What's the price? When? Right? And if it's the LDA, when is it going to happen? How many? What's the price? 3 simple questions. A couple of just broad numbers on demand and supply in the public and the private sector. And really in a time of scarcity, what you get is somebody gets, the George's Avenue social housing, they're lovely houses. I looked at them and I thought, Jesus, they're very nice houses. I'd love my daughter to have one. And in a time, there's only, I think, 12 of them, that's right. And they're very fine houses. But what you get is when you're not only building 12, you get one person saying, why are they getting them? What's happening for me? And why do my kids have to go out and live in Navan and buy a 330? And why, So what we really need is, if 30% of all housing was public housing, built to that standard, they cost about 240 grand to build, that were affordable for people to buy, there'd be enough houses for everyone. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. So what we had last year, we had a little over 18,000 new houses were built. Out of that, about 13,000 were estate homes and apartments. There's about 4,700 for once-off homes. There's only about 270 single homes built in Dublin. So most of the once-off homes are in the city here. In Dublin, there's 5,800 completions, and out of that, 3,900 households bought houses in Dublin, which is very low. And they were competing with 1,277 non-households, which would be state and private companies buying blocks of units. And meanwhile, there's less than 1,400 available. So these are the sort of headline figures we're bombarded with all the time to show how symptomatically bad Dublin